Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Beyond Stats podcast. On this episode, Diego and Marc will review the Clemson Tigers and how they use tech to make the national championship the last 4 out of 5 years.
Yeah, so thanks, Marc, for the introduction. I want to get into a little bit of education on what the Clemson football program had in place for their athletes. Basically, if you haven't heard about Castle, it's the name of Clemson's program, and it's run by Mr. Alex Bina. He's a 27-year-old director of applied science for Clemson. And the interesting thing I want to point out is they did a study, looking at Alabama, Baylor, Florida, Kentucky, and Texas. So they analyzed all these teams based on their recruit rankings in 2010. Basically, they said, okay, based on the average recruit ranking over time, you would expect the team to perform this way, right? So, if a certain team got a lot more of number 1, number 2 recruits, they were expected to,
Like Bama,
right?
Yeah.
They're expected to perform in this, get this many wins, this percentage of rate. So then he identified, okay, what teams outperformed how they recruited. So let's say there's certain teams that recruited down the ladder a little bit, but they ended up performing higher than they should have according to this equation. So what Bina did was he identified these teams that outperformed how they recruited and say, what are they doing? What are they doing that's extra, and that's giving them the higher expected value. So extra in this case was inner workings of team strength and conditioning programs, nutrition, science, sports medicine, as well as a variety of types of personnel employed. So basically he said, and Clemson stood out, right? Clemson stood out amongst that group of, hey, we're not getting the highest recruits, but we're still outperforming that standard. So that was very interesting to see what is Clemson doing, quote unquote, extra that's allowing them to outperform their recruitment rankings. So basically, let's get into Castle, and it's the Clemson Applied Science Lab housed in the Allen N. Reeves Football Complex. I think, last week's episode was on LSU, and we talked about when they had the $20-30 million complex. So Clemson's out here with the $55 million complex. For the fun side, they have bowling, arcade, different stuff like that. But I want to get into what they offer to the athletes as far as performance. So their two biggest touch points is performance and expediting recovery. So the ultimate goal is quantifying the body's performance, and then what can we do to get them back on the field as fast as possible if they are experiencing any type of injury or anything like that. So what are your thoughts on that, Marc? I mean, just how much emphasis that they're putting in on this.
Well, I think just investing to your athletes, it can only pay off with the results they're getting. I mean, Clemson, they're located in the ACC, so it's not always the breadwinner for recruiting. Right. Usually a lot of high-star recruits, 5-star, 4-stars tend to go to the SEC or even the Big 12 or the Pac-12. But Clemson's really found a way to really invest in their athletes, invest in their staff, and ultimately they made championship the last 4 out of 5 years. Also have developed some great players that turned out to be NFL stars. Now they have Trevor Lawrence going through their pipeline. So really excited for what they have to offer. What I really liked about them is the fact they had Striver. So another VR technology, allowing you to get more reps, whether it's on the field or off. So what they did was set up a GoPro behind their line of scrimmage. So throughout any of their practice sessions, it would be filmed. But also you could put on the VR headset off the field and see a 360 view of the practice. So help simulate what you just went through in practice. If you're a quarterback, you could use it for 7-on-7 to go through your plays, see different reads on the defense, use it for scouting purposes as well. So I think this helps, especially in their conference. They're in the ACC, so they're not always playing the most elite level competition week to week compared to the SEC, but it helps them when they're on the national stage and they're able to compete with the Alabama, the Oklahomas, the Ohio States. They fell a little bit short this year, but ultimately Clemson's going to be around for a while, and I think year by year it's going to only improve their recruiting.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Bringing up the ACC, it's kind of interesting how they've emerged out of the ACC. Even they've emerged out of these recruitment ranking projections, but also they are the one ACC team that seems to be kind of leading the way and poking their head out amongst the other teams. So yeah, and then touching more about Castle, the Striver thing is crazy. Going into just repetitions and being able to have that real life experience and have your mind going through different changes real time is just crazy to even be able to do that. So that's Strivers, one thing people might not have heard of if you're tuning in. Some other stuff that Castle offers, that occupies. Some of these things you might have heard of, some of these things you might have not, like sensory deprivation pods. So it's basically 1,200 pounds of salt, and so you go in for about 45 minutes. Players decides they can go in with the lights on or lights off. You get it, and these retail for about 30,000. And so these players have access to this 24/7. You might even go into a soft sleep. Basically, this is getting your body into the most relaxed state and get you to recover almost in a meditative state. Wow. And then they can use that as often as they want. So yeah, Bina just goes into talking about that, and I think the Patriots have 2 pods in an even bigger chamber. So like you're starting to see this transition in. They're starting to be more of like a professional club as far as the equipment that they have.
Right. Yeah, football is a very physical game. So not only if you could transition into your ice tanks or your recovery, your cryo chambers, things of that nature, but now you're working towards sleep deprivation and really tracking your sleep and monitoring that. It can not only help you but mentally, but physically with recovery.
Right, definitely. Which leads me to the next point, which is they have Rise, something called Rise. So they partnered with Rise, and basically Rise monitors your sleep. And basically every single player has a ribbon that's underneath their mattress, and it's ballistocardiography. That's a name for you.
Wow.
So that's a specific scientific discipline that detects every single heartbeat overnight. And so now coaches and training staff are able to monitor players' sleep, which was the number one issue according to the NFL was sleep, detrimental sleep cycles. So basically the players aren't getting the rest they need, and that's showing up on the field. And so basically with Rise, again, Clemson's going out of their way. Again, every single player has this. And so just a stat out here, the advantages are real. A series of studies show that getting enough sleep can lead to reductions in injury rate as much as 70%. Wow. Illness 1/3, the chance of catching a cold, while sleep deprivation can diminish reaction time by 18%, metabolism by more than 30%. Effort, play execution, and speed of learning were all improved too. Among football-specific benefits were the potential to trim 40-yard dash times by 1/10 of a second, improve field goal accuracy by 20%, and cut mental errors in half. So that's just, that's pretty significant, percentages there, and that's all just based on sleep monitoring and what Clemson's doing to separate themselves with Rise.
Yeah, I mean, continuing to separate themselves. Can't stress enough how important sleep is in regards to recovery. So not only is it helping with being cognitive, but your performance on the field is benefiting. If you could cut down your 40 time and things of that nature just off of getting extra sleep, then that would make it worthwhile. That doesn't even come into play some of the technology and equipment they're using for their actual player performance. So kudos to Clemson for putting that together.
Yeah, and I think it's also cool because you get to, a lot of other teams can start to realize this, and this really might be a factor that it's something, it's not easy to correct, right? Getting a whole squad of guys to go to sleep earlier. But if you can study the impacts and see that it really does change, their performance on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis, it's an easy thing to tackle as far as, if everyone's serious about getting an extra hour of sleep, everyone can do that. Everyone can set an alarm, be more dedicated, more strict on their schedule, more disciplined. And it's something small that a couple extra hours every player gets adds up over time so much that I think you'll be able to see that's change on the field. So these new studies that are coming out are really holding their weight. And now seeing Clemson, a team that implemented this to the fullest extent, is really getting to reap the benefits of that. it's fun to see.
Yeah, I kind of compare it back to my days back in college. Usually the day after a game anyway, you're so banged up and sore. It's going to be a recovery day. So whether you're hitting the athletic trainer's room or you're getting some film time, catching up on the game from the previous day, usually you're taking a lot of mental reps trying to recover anyway. But now implementing these tanks, you could even come back directly from a flight. Sometimes you're traveling across the country, get back from a flight, maybe your dorm or your apartment's going to be a little more hectic. Decide to kind of nest at the actual lab and just sleep in a tank for maybe a little bit, and that could go a little bit more of a way. So the next day, you're a little more refreshed.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's actually a really good point, because you're flying back and forth, traveling. And if you didn't have that, if you didn't have Castle there available, then players would say, hey, man, I had no other choice, get in the tub or whatever. But now having those options available, like having this, deprivation tank there whenever you want it, there's no excuse, So it's like you're giving the players all the avenues they need and all the resources they need to maximize their rest and their recovery. So, yeah, I think it's very important, very, very, very beneficial, to the team. I can foresee a lot of teams trying to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, and at least we could say from a championship level standpoint, the two teams, they're measuring pretty much all you can from an athlete standpoint, from sweat tracking pills that they're ingesting to all the way sleep tracking or monitoring to VR headsets. A lot of championship level teams are incorporating technology, so this is not something that could be overlooked. And we know our generation and the generation coming below us, everyone's adaptable to tech. So younger athletes are very used to using tech, whether it's in school, outside of school. Now it's getting onto the field. So I think that would only help improve the actual player-coach relationship and really getting players to understand what it takes full scope to be the best athlete they could be.
Also, that's such a good point, because, on this podcast, we're trying to reach out. Part of the audience that we're trying to get to is those younger guys out there right now, that if you're in high school, if you're in middle school, and you're trying to figure out what is D1 like what are those guys on? The more you get familiar with this information that we're sharing with you now, it's going to help you build the right mindset so to get you geared up and ready for what you're going to experience.
Mamba mentality.
Right, you've got to, absolutely, that's spot on. I mean, in this time, now is no better time to have a Mamba mentality, right? And so if you're serious about going D1 or even D2, get yourself familiar with these programs. Get yourself familiar for what they're doing. If they're doing sleep monitoring, you need to get on sleep monitoring right now. You don't need Rise. You don't need a ribbon under your mattress. But what you can do is start being more disciplined about your sleep. If you're seeing that this is what it takes to get to that next level, and this is what those next level teams are doing, if you're starting that now, once you get to that level, it'll be normal to you. Don't wait to get to that level.
Don't wait to go to Clemson.
And then start monitoring everything you're doing. You guys should be monitoring all your cardio, start monitoring your sleep. You can do it now with Apple Watches, different smart watches. So I would urge you guys, and I think a big part of what we're trying to do is trying to get the younger athletes on the technology sooner rather than later.
Bridge the gap.
We're really trying to bridge that gap. I hope that we had at least some players can get some useful information out of this. Athletes or just like-minded people that are wondering what's going on in the tech world at the D1 level. And it's super cool to see Clemson that made it all the way up to a national championship. They're happen to be using a lot of tech, just like LSU we talked about last episode. And there's a lot, there's more tech that's coming and that's being implemented, and we'll definitely keep everyone on track along the way, along this journey of tech and sports. But Clemson and the tech, get ready, because it's coming. You're going to keep seeing it, and they're really on the cutting edge. Likewise with LSU, and I'm sure Alabama and these other teams are going to be right behind them, trying to catch on to that next tech that's going to give them that extra percent.
Beyond Stats Podcast, home for athletes, trainers, and coaches alike to go beyond the stats and into the deeper understanding of the game.
Absolutely. So, we want to thank you for tuning in to the Beyond Stats podcast and tuning into another Team Tech Spotlight. Congratulations to the Clemson Tigers. I know they fell a little bit short, but still a successful run.
Heck of a season.
I'm sure they'll be in the contention again next year.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode and going beyond the stats. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a review on your streaming platform or visiting our socials and searching N-Form Stats.